Fun. We're live. And this is an exciting episode. We'll see on the title when this comes out. But listener, welcome to another episode of A Podcast. Your host, Stephen Maxted. And today we have guest, good friend of the show, David Peters, founder of Construction Clock, on with us. And yeah, welcome to the show, David. We're excited to have you on here, right on time. Boo-hoo. Make some funnies on this. Yeah, why don't you tell the listener a little bit about yourself? We go back a bit, a few years back, kind of crossing paths in the tech world and startup scene in Manitoba. I'm excited to talk more about that with you on the episode today. But why don't you start off just telling a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, my background is basically been construction as a contractor in Manitoba for like the last 2 decades, and I really only moved to Winnipeg and started knowing people here in the late 2010s. And so I met you, I think, about 2 years ago, and it was basically like showing up to networking events that entrepreneurs went to, and you were one of the people that consistently went there, and so was I. And so I think what I realized very quickly is in Winnipeg, the scene is really small. It's like, it's bigger now, but when we started showing up, it was like the same 10 or 20 people that were there. And so,
Yeah.
and I became friends with all you guys. And so now, as a more established entrepreneur, I feel like we've all kind of matured in the last 2 years, and then kind of like worked together to kind of build that network effect here. And so I think there's more like 100 people at those networking events for entrepreneurs. And so, yeah, it's definitely grown in the last 2 years, but you were one of the OG.
Yeah, there was a few of us to start off with.
Week after week. So that's how we got to know each other.
Yeah, that's definitely a trip down memory lane. I would definitely agree with you over the last 2 years. It's kind of funny to do a kind of a snapshot look back at the companies that I was pitching for at the time and where you were at in. I think you're still kind of running a little bit of both, or we'll get into the companies that you've participated in and starting up in Manitoba in the past, but I think you were still making like almost a decision. It was just happening then to really lean into the tech side of things more in the construction clock side.
Yeah, at that time, I was basically winding down my construction company and then making the transition into tech. And it was probably the scariest time of my life because at that time, I didn't know really anything about tech, but I knew that I wanted to build something that would scale. And so that's why I started showing up at these events, because I just had no idea what I was doing, and knew that I needed to like connect with people. That was the only way I was going to actually like figure out how to build something. So yeah, it was primarily because I was just learning as I was going.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Dave, what kind of construction stuff were you involved in a prior life, to give kind of some like feet on the ground? What were you doing when you were learning in field?
I started construction against my will. I built my parents' house 20 years ago, and I left high school in probably grade 12, and I built their house, and then started working different types of construction. But nothing was really so interesting to me that I wanted to spend years doing it at the beginning anyways. And so I basically traveled all over Canada doing different trades. And I think when I was like 20 years old, I landed on just that I was going to do general renovation carpentry. And that turned into framing carpentry. And I spent a few years in Calgary framing houses there for home builders. And then in 2015, I moved to Winnipeg. I grew up in a small town of Winkler, and It's actually a small city now, but I moved to Winnipeg,
Yeah.
and then my construction company kind of flourished here because we specialized in doing cottage renovations. And so we would do like full exterior cottage renovations, kitchens, and things like that. There's so many cottages in Manitoba and in Ontario that are from the 50s, 60s, and 70s that all need to be updated. And so we spent years doing that. And yeah, it was really, really great. And the only thing that I didn't like about that job is like we do this amazing project for a customer. And if I looked at like doing this for the next 20 or 30 years, I might be able to have an impact on like 100 people in my life because we might be able to do 100 really
Right.
nice cottage renovations. And that was going to be like my legacy is being able to give 100 cottage owners, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually like really great to be able to do that for people and like allow them to show up and see how much
Yeah.
their cottage has changed that they grew up in, and it was just that I just didn't see myself doing that for 20 to 30 more years and feeling fulfilled through that. And so I made the decision to like do something that I felt could scale exponentially, and where our team could build software that will serve thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people instead of just a couple hundred. And so, yeah, we made this, or I made this really big transition from wrapping up my construction company into starting a construction technology company. And I feel like there was a lot of lessons learned through that. It was probably like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And we just made a ridiculous amount of mistakes, as every entrepreneur does. But I think the thing that got us established over the last 2 years is the fact that we were able to build a team here in Manitoba that really believed in our mission. And at the beginning, it was like 1 or 2 people that I could convince to come on board. They wouldn't get paid a lot, but we would have a lot of fun doing this. And I think the other thing that I learned is that I was more of a networker than I ever thought I was. And so in construction, I had to do all the business development. I owned the company. I had to acquire new work, and I had to be the project manager, and I had to also be the person on site. And I think that I had gotten pretty good at building relationships with people and figuring out their needs, and then ultimately like doing a renovation for them. And when I jumped into this, I had to spend most of my time networking, building relationships, and running a team all at the same time. And I think like just being able to do that all day, every day made me realize I was actually like this is more or less what I was made to do. And
Cool.
in Manitoba, the primary thing is we're such a small community that you have to build relationships here. And so one of the really big things I did early on is I built a lot of strong relationships with like our early believers, and I leaned into that. And I think that was the thing that saved us through a lot of the mistakes we made at the beginning stages is having really loyal early believers in what you're doing. That was my experience at the beginning.
That's awesome. What was what was the TSN turning point kind of thing? When you think about that from when you were talking about like doing the cabin construction, was there like one day or one job or a certain drive like I mean physically driving back from a job or something where it clicked in your head where you're like, yeah, you know what? I want to do something bigger than this. And like you said too, that could be someone's entire great career doing that, but you kind of had this moment where, hey, I want to take this thing to the next level. Did you remember that moment?
Totally.
Yeah. Cool.
I was leaving a job site for the last time, and the customer was extremely happy. It turned out really nice. And I just didn't have the excitement that I did from that as much as I had in the past. And when I left that job, I thought like my candle had kind of burnt out for this type of work. I just didn't feel like it fueled me anymore the way it had in previous years. And I really felt like I was still young enough to transition into something else, but I had enough experience in something that I could leverage the last 2 decades of construction experience into the next thing. And
Right.
yeah, I was sitting at the edge of their driveway, and I was pretty sure that that was one of the last big projects I was going to complete.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really cool. Definitely had a couple of moments or like conversations about that where you have this just like very defining moment that, was unexpected and totally helps you steer the ship into something new. And that's great. That's really fun to hear.
Yeah, and it's almost a good thing that you make that decision, and that's, I don't even know if it's as much of a decision, but you let it sink in that you're ready for something different, but you don't realize how much work it's going to be to actually transition to something else. Because if you did know how much work it was going to be, I don't think that anybody would ever do it. And so it's actually
Yeah.
wonderful when you can make that decision without with a little bit of ignorance to like how much work you're getting yourself into.
Yep. Super relatable. On Yeah, first of all, we'll talk after more about that. For me, we'll play more catch up. So something that I find very interesting, the listener always knows I got the website on here, and we'll kind of relay this back into the Manitoba thing. But with you creating this tech, there's probably only so many folks that you can really sell to in Manitoba, for how many construction companies there are. So when you're looking outside, Manitoba borders, are you thinking like Canada? And I'm kind of teeing this one up. I know that you're in the States, and we're going to talk population and stuff with this one. But how did that growth look like for you guys? Did you start locally here with folks that you already worked with, or did you know people in other places that were kind of looking for the tech, and then that came together that way, or
Yeah.
combination of things?
So at the start, building those relationships with construction companies in Manitoba was the most important thing because our tech sucked at the beginning. So then you had to sell.
Right.
We had to sell local Manitoba construction companies on what we were building out, what we were going to build, kind of what our mission and vision were for the product. And because we had relationships with them, some of them were very young relationships, but because I met them in person, this was right near the end of the pandemic, I was able to convince them that we were going to build this fantastic tech that they were going to use. And so at the beginning, all we did was focus on Manitoba companies.
Yeah.
And they became our first investors. They became our early adopter beta testers. And they're basically, you're like, we'll believe in you regardless of how bad the experience is at the beginning. And so for us, all we cared
Huge.
about was Manitoba companies. And we did
Yeah.
things that really did not scale at all. I would bring coffees to construction sites, and that's how I would do a warm intro, get my foot in the door. My name's David Peters. I'm here with some coffee and donuts. Can I talk to you about what I'm working on? And I did that for months and probably found our first like 20 customers that way. And our customer is a
Yeah.
construction company. And so after that, then we opened it up to kind of Canada and the United States, and then that's when we realized like it's way harder to sell something to somebody that you've never met and
Yeah.
give them technical support. But we started scaling out after that, but having that base of Manitoba companies to start with was what allowed us to get our product figured out. Because at the beginning, you don't even really know what your product is. You think you know, but that product changes so quickly based on how your customers are using them that it's really nice to have local companies that believe in what you're doing, that invest in what you're doing, and that will like kind of stick with you even when like your tech really sucks.
Totally. No, you definitely, it sounds like you definitely had some really positive folks go through that experience because
Yeah.
I know from, yeah, early on in other tech ventures and like the agriculture side, convincing people the same thing. And it sounds so similar. I mean, kind of a little bit like in some ways old school, but now starting to be really tech savvy on the ag side. It never hurt to show up with coffee. That was definitely an in-person was always, preferred. Um, I just kind of feel that energy of probably what you had to go through to make those relationships happen. And um, probably, yeah, big positive impact on them in the long run too, from having been early on with you guys. They got to see the whole evolution of the app. And what is it funny to look back on what the first app looked like for you guys now? Because I'm sure it's changed like so much. I remember you showing me early on stuff, and I've seen it more recently, so I'm
Yeah.
probably already light in the memory about what it even looked like. But
I've seen screenshots of our original app, and it's not pretty. But
that's okay.
that's basically like the journey, though. That's I'm sure if you looked at Skip the Dishes' first mobile app, it wasn't pretty either. So
Yep.
um, yeah, I think that that's a really necessary process for every company to go through, though, is building something that you're kind of embarrassed of and having people give you honest feedback, and that's harder to do than you think. It's hard to get people to give you real honest feedback because nobody
Yep.
wants to hurt your feelings, and that's the exact thing that we needed at the beginning to improve it. And
Totally agree.
a friend of ours, Andre Rudnick, he said to me once, he said, you don't even need to worry about selling your product because it'll be hard enough to convince people to use it for free that selling it is like so far down the journey that
Interesting.
all you have to worry about is like getting people to even use it and giving it away for free. And that was a big wake up call for us. Like, we're not even worried about selling this. We're just worried about having people use it and wanting them to use it or having them want to use it
Right.
because when the tech sucks, it's difficult to even get people to use it every single day.
Yeah. Well, where do you see an advantage for companies like a little like into the app, and we can come back to some Manitoba stuff here. But like, is there a certain size of company that this works best on, or is it really for anyone that wants to help track things and maybe just walk through very lightly about what even happens because we don't have a visual in front of us. But um,
Yeah. So our app, it auto clocks construction employees in and out of job sites based on their geolocation. And to do that, they need location sharing turned on. And that's what allows them to get auto clocked in and never have to fill out time cards ever again. And so, in theory, that sounds amazing. And in reality, the companies that actually adopt this are not as much a certain size as the owner has made a clear decision that, like, they want to be innovative and they want to reduce admin costs. And
right,
so the biggest thing that our app does is like completely eliminates the need to like have to gather time cards up and like the validity of those time cards and compile them and then to properly allocate that time to a construction project. And so what we find is the customers that end up um, thriving with a software like ours are companies that really want to get the data out of it. So they're constantly exporting project
Totally.
hours and figuring out how much they differentiate from their estimate. And basically, like, taking a deep dive into where they're profitable and where they're not, and who's effective and who isn't. And not all companies are like that. I know when I ran my construction company, I was far less concerned with the data than I was just like, let's get this job done and then we'll figure it out
Right.
after. And what we're realizing is that the companies that thrive with our software are the ones that want to do that during the project. As the project's going on, they want to see, are they on track? Are they spending too much on labor? Are they did they estimate this project wrong? And so that's what our app does in a nutshell. And yeah, we have single user customers, and we have, I think our largest customer has 50 or 60 employees, and yeah, we're in 7 countries, and so I don't think
Nice.
obviously the majority of our companies are in Canada, the United States, but we had a company come on from Malta, and I had to Google where Malta was,
Very cool.
and so that was an interesting company we brought on, and we have a couple companies in Hawaii, and
Cool.
they run construction very differently there. So yeah, that's our product in a nutshell.
Awesome. And how are you growing? Like, I mean, if you started off meeting folks with coffee and a very like warm, easy welcome in that way, now I know you're doing a little bit of travel, but I'm sure it's not to the same level. You can't take coffee to every construction site in the States and Canada. So what does that look like now for you guys? How have you adjusted over time?
Yeah, so now 95% of our customers we've never met in person, and we had to learn to build relationships with our customers very quickly using Zoom, using phone calls, using text messages, and that is our primary method now of communicating with them, is just
Yeah.
whatever is comfortable to them. That's how we will communicate with them. And being like, when I say like we're fast, we have to be replying to that message less than 5 seconds after they send it to us, because these are busy
Wow.
people who are on job sites and they will
Yep.
lose interest immediately. And so our responsiveness has gone through the roof. And yeah, we're always on standby for our customers, because they are always, when they're having issues or they just don't know how to do something inside of our app, they want an answer immediately. And that's kind of replaced going onto job sites and bringing people coffees.
Totally.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's just part of the evolution of the story, right? It's kind of, you see those like tech things. It starts off with like a skateboard, then it's a bike, then it's a car, then it's a race car.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just seems like it follows that storyline perfectly. Yeah. And so now that you've kind of like scaling, what does it look like to be based in Manitoba and doing what you're doing? It sounded, like the team is kind of growing a bit and you guys are now back in person and stuff. What does that feel like now for you?
So we have a really great small ecosystem in the Manitoba, call it startup tech scene. And the great thing about that is we don't have to compete nearly as much with a bunch of like big tech companies that are in our market. Like if we were in San Francisco or in Austin, there's 100 companies that are trying to basically find the same people that you're looking for. And in
Right.
Manitoba, we have to look at this as a positive, that we have a small tech scene here, and we get to really like build an interesting culture here around working in person, building companies here that that the teams really collaborate together. Which, when you're building fully remote companies, that's far less of a factor. It's just way harder to build a close-knit group of people working together in an office. And I think that we really have that in Manitoba here, just because in Winnipeg, it's a small city, so everybody lives 20 minutes away from the office max, and we come together and we work collaboratively. And that is our superpower here, is that we're able to do that, and we're not stuck in 60 minutes of traffic if we have to go into the office, or if we fully work remote, that, you know, all we know is the other person's name, and that's pretty much it. And I think we got to really leverage that here in Manitoba, that we have that.
No, definitely agreed. That is a huge advantage. I mean, minus the potholes, but you're right. Everything's 20 minutes away as far as that goes. So, yeah, and then you're right. There is less competition, and we're also in a central time zone, so that's helpful too for some other stuff.
Yeah.
In terms of being able to get a hold of folks. So there's definitely a few advantages here to have that.
Yeah, I never even thought about the time zone thing, but we can take meetings with anybody in North America because of the fact that we're right in the middle, and we can do early morning meetings, and we can do late afternoon meetings, and kind of work with everybody. And if you were in Toronto, or if you were in Vancouver, you just wouldn't have that. It would just be really a lot harder. So there is a lot of advantages of being in Manitoba, and like I'm actually really glad that this is where we built our company, instead of thinking that we would base it out of a big city, and like even Waterloo, and then building a fully remote tech team. That would be an entirely different culture with an entirely different focus, I think.
Yeah, it becomes a point where virtual help's wonderful, but then when you're really scaling, bring everyone together and you'll have them under one roof. Here's the nuances of reading, language within a room that are missed virtually. You really have to make sure that you explain everything to folks when you're doing the virtual thing, because they don't have like the just stop by the office moments, or overhearing something that they're gonna take to their desk and run with, and be able to quickly react to that. So
and I call us in office, but we have an employee that's in Edmonton, and we have one of our employees is in India right now. And so we get the benefits of both, because we get to work collaboratively as a team, and we get to leverage technology to work with all of our staff that are, happen to be in India or in Edmonton, or our customers that are halfway across the world. And so I feel like there's a real advantage to working in the office, in that you get to like leverage both in person and remote working.
Yeah, absolutely. We have on the marketing side, we have virtual, and some people are out west, some people are out east. We're just kind of making it work as we're going. But I have had the thought lately, I'm like, oh, it would be nice to have more folks in-house, locally here. We have a couple, but just juggling. You guys are growing way quicker. We got more time. We're growing slow on that side of things, so we don't have to make that happen right away. And how many folks do you guys at now? You said about 14, I think, before we got on that.
Yeah, we're right around 14 in total. And in 2024, it will be an interesting year, because we're going to grow our customers by we're going to probably triple the number of customers we have. So then we need to probably have a couple more customer success people on our team.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. I guess we're part of the journey too, from early on with coffees. Now you're digitally onboarding, and then growing this thing, right? What's that ratio look like? What's healthy look like for the company and the customer? And
well, so right now we have one dedicated customer success person that probably manages about 1,500 people, and I think that's like almost the threshold where, somebody can manage 1,500 customers in the day-to-day issues that they have. And so, I think for us, the biggest thing that we're doing is we're trying to figure out how we can automate more things without losing that human touch. So the most important thing for me when I'm calling tech support is that I can actually talk to somebody. But how can I get through to somebody the quickest? And so for us, we want to try and automate that where we can get through to somebody really fast, and then solve that issue instead of having all of these like chat bots and things like that. I mean, that's technically automation, but it's not a wonderful solution. It has its place, but I think being able to talk to a human is by far the most enjoyable way of.
Yeah, very agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other day I got bounced around actually on a call for tech support, and basically led to dead end roads on two of the calls. And the third time I called in, I got someone that was just so different, like at a very high level. They were so easy to chat with. Now they're easy to email. They're like, hey, just let me know if you need anything else, basically. And I'm like, this is awesome. I won't do a bad shout out there, but I'm sure it's a situation of folks not in the same office space. A lot of digital stuff. It may have just got dropped within the transfer of lines there, but I could see the frustration for. It's important to have it easy to get a hold of, right?
I think if I would have been able to learn something a little bit quicker, it would have been that as an entrepreneur, as a small business, we don't do a good enough job of talking to our customers. And I think that hinders a lot of it definitely hurt us at the beginning. Like I spent a lot of time talking to people that I wanted to use our app and so call it business development, but talking to your existing customers about the issues that they're having. I can't overstate that enough, that is probably like the thing that we spend the majority of our time doing now. If we get one of our customers on the phone, we're asking them what else can we improve on? What do you hate about our app? What pisses you off?
Yeah.
And that's all the stuff that you really don't want to hear, that you have to hear. And I would encourage every entrepreneur, no matter what industry you're in, to really be talking to your customers far more than you think that you should be, because
Yeah.
it's very insightful. And I wish we had learned that a lot sooner.
Yeah. Anything else that you wish that, or that you got advice on, or things that you learned on the journey that you look back on and you're like, oh yeah, like that was a light bulb moment for us?
Yeah. So I've been helping somebody kind of explore creating a food product here in Manitoba. It's like it was like a really, really healthy snack. And I was taking them through the journey of figuring out who their customer was and figuring out the economics, how we price it, what our channels to market are, and all the things that now are super easy for us to think about after we've done it a few times. And as a first-time entrepreneur, they're not thinking about any of that. It's a pretty simple way of thinking about it, where they think like, if we make it, they will come, and like build it and they will come. And it's just not like that. It's really about figuring out who your customer is and figuring out how you're going to get the product to them. And the thing that I didn't really ask them is how much time they want to be spending doing this this business. And one thing that they realized very quickly was that this was going to take a tremendous amount of time, and they were willing to work 8 hours a day on this. And you and me both know that 8 hours a day is like, that's like about half of what you need to be investing in your business at the start. And so that was an awakening. And then the amount of money that it actually costs to start a business at the beginning, and the amount of time it'll take to get to break even. And so in going through that process, it was really great for me to go through that process with them, and for them to kind of uncover a lot of these assumptions that they had made were really wrong, that it was going to cost 5 times more money than they thought it would. It would take 5 times more work. And then you the quicker I got them to a place where they could make that decision of, is this what I want to do or is this not? I think a lot of entrepreneurs, when they're jumping in, they get so deep into the entrepreneur journey that they don't realize this isn't really what they want to do, but they're kind of stuck in it, and that's kind of like how self-employed people get to their position where they're self-employed not because they want to be, but because this is like this is what they got themselves into. And I feel like I did that as a construction company owner, where I hadn't properly mapped out what our business was, why we existed. It was just about like building relationships with the customers and doing the work, and none of that was allowing me to kind of carve out what I wanted to build for a business. And so doing that at the beginning, super important. Building out forecasts, I was like, man, that's a waste of time. Now I'm like, it's the most important thing in the world is to build out that forecast. Because if you're going to put in 100 hours a week and you're not going to be profitable till year 7, are you okay with that? And so it's a really nice roadmap to see exactly how difficult this is going to be, and it gets you to a point where you can make decisions way quicker and way more clearly. And so I would really encourage people to, if you're thinking about entrepreneurship, or if you are in the entrepreneur journey somewhere, like you and I are, that you have these discovery
kind of like moments, we'll call it. Like, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, and the only way you can get to that moment is if you do this work. If you're doing the work to figure out like what you want out of a business, and I think having moments like that are very important for entrepreneurs, because it makes you figure out why you're doing what you're doing.
Do you think that sorry, after, do you think timing was important for you guys in terms of it being post-COVID when you guys are getting into this? Because I know people spent a lot of time on phones. Was that an advantage for you guys, or did that come off in your favor? Because I kind of could see it being that way in terms of the tech thing, but did you guys feel that?
Yes, I think the world is a lot more adaptive to technology post-COVID.
Yeah.
And there's pros and cons to that, but I think that people have accepted that our world is a lot more digitized now. And so if anything, that definitely helped us in the construction industry is quite a late adopter to technology. So I think we are going into the era of digitization in our industry. And so COVID, if it helped anything at all, it was that everybody is now accepting of the digitization of every part of your business. And so that did help us in that regard.
Awesome. Was there any downfalls to that though, on the flip side? Timing wise, or what did that mean for you guys?
The downfall for us, or the downsides, would be that we now compete with every other digitization out there, and that the amount of noise out there is insane. All that everybody talks about is like that there's an app for that. And so how do you separate yourself from the crowd properly? And that's why really effective branding and marketing is super key. Any business that's, well, any tech business nowadays needs to do an incredible job of differentiating themselves, because there's a lot of noise out there. And apps have a minimum threshold. Apple and Google have done such an incredible job of building intuitive apps that if your app isn't incredibly fluid in the, call it the happy flow or the journey, you will immediately lose your users because they have an expectation of what's required in an app. And so yeah, there's a high bar now to exceed
Right.
to get into the technology space.
Yeah, and then how much time do we want to be on our phones? I think this is an obvious advancement for things where folks don't want to have to click in and click out. Like I remember years ago, worked in a restaurant for a very brief period of time, and even having like kind of like stamp in there, it seems silly. I was like, oh, forgot to do that because I'm just kind of more like get to
Yeah.
work, be working thing. And I would have been someone that would have been there, 15 minutes early. And I'm forgetting to do that though. And on the flip side, I had the negative repercussions of, well, you didn't do it, so how do we know for sure? And I'm like, oh, that
Yeah.
seems silly. That was a part-time thing I just really wanted to do, but it's nice that you guys just have that auto setting and become so natural for folks just to have it on, and then they don't have to worry about it. From both the person who's working there and the manager gets to see big data, manage the job nicer. So I see that being a huge thing for you guys.
Phones are here to stay. They're not going anywhere. So you just adapt
Yeah,
or you don't. I don't know anybody that doesn't have like even my parents have smartphones now. And so it's just a thing that's in our lives. And we can use our phones to make our lives way easier or we can use them in their most basic form. And so do I want to be on my phone as much as I am? Probably not. And I think like the next great invention will be like figuring out a way that you can still use your phone without ever having to look at it, because that is probably like the greatest time suck in my day is just staring at
yep,
my phone.
yep.
Yeah.
Emails, phone calls, the apps going off.
Yeah.
With notifications are. David, for you guys now coming into the new year, any upcoming dates that we should tell the listener about, either like trade shows, or I know you've had some, we didn't even really get to get into that much here today, but you've had success doing pitch events. Is there anything on your calendar that's coming up?
Yeah. So
You want to share?
2024, we plan on focusing primarily on scaling our company. And so we were just selected as one of the featured startup companies at the International Builders Show, which is the
Nice.
largest building and construction show in the world. And so that was a huge win. We competed against a lot of companies for that spot. And so that's kind of our entrance into showing our tech off to the world in the construction world. We've
Yeah.
been pretty active on social media, but I think this will be where we kind of come out and say that we're the number one time tracking app for construction. And so that's where we're going to do that.
Very
So
cool.
that's at the end of February. And then this weekend, when this podcast gets released, we will have announced a massive partnership with the largest construction app out there, and they are called Company Cam, and they are the biggest player when it comes to construction job site photo management. And
Very
so,
cool.
yeah, that is going to allow us to make a huge push into the US. And so 2024 is all about scaling. So we spent the last 2 years as a startup, but now we are going to scale up our company. And by the end of 2024, we will be a very different company than we are right now.
That's awesome. Must
Yeah.
be cool in the future to do 2.0. I mean, I've already seen it from before this. I kind of had that insight, but it'd be cool to do this
We'll
in the
call it like
future.
5.0.
Yeah. That's awesome. Oh, pardon me, I'm choking up here at the end here. David, outside of that's great insight. I'm very excited to see what you guys get up to at that show in February and hear about that and witness it online. If folks want to get a hold of you, let's say they're hearing this, yeah, live on here, and they want to get a hold of you guys. The website seems like a really good starting point for them. There's social media links on the left right now, maybe another update, but is there another way that they should get a hold of you or the company that you would recommend them to?
Yeah. So if you're not in construction, our our app won't really mean a lot to you. But you can definitely check out our our Instagram page is where like we come out with our media team does an incredible job making these mini documentaries on our customers, and they are actually incredibly awesome video content. So check us out on Instagram, and if you want to ask me questions, I live on LinkedIn, so reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I love giving back. I've had a number of people in Manitoba help me in the last couple of years, and I would like to do the same for any interested entrepreneurs in Manitoba. I think that there's so much value I can bring in just a simple conversation where people are confused about maybe where their next steps are, and I'm always happy to give my personal experiences of how I kind of went through that journey.
Awesome. That is great to hear, David.
Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate you making time in your busy schedule to be on here. And I'm excited for when this drops and in the new year for that partnership. That's going to be awesome for you guys. I'm very familiar with that company, as I am with yours. That's going to be very neat to see. So congratulations ahead of time on that.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast. And I'm excited to see how your company continues to grow and evolve in Manitoba here.
Awesome. Thank you very much, David. We will talk more with you soon, and have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye, Stephen.